this number.
Warning, the following show contains conservative posturing, radical Christian ideas, and may offend pagans, Wiccans, Islamic fundamentalists, and other unenlightened individuals. Callers and guests may be subjected to brash and offensive comments by the hosts and any other type of bullying tactics available. But that's okay. We know why you're here.
This concludes this test of the emergency broadcast system.
Tonight is March 15th, 2009.
Good evening.
Welcome to World of the
evening,
Unexplained.
world.
Wow, that's the wrong intro music for the show.
Is it?
I think so.
Nah.
Is it?
No.
I get them confused. I get confused
Yeah,
with the
you
other
do.
show. Okay, well, good. We got the right music. I thought it was the wrong. Anyway.
It's the piano. It's always the piano. It's
Yeah,
always
the piano.
that
The
gets you
piano. That's right.
going.
You're cool. You're right.
playing the one key over and over again.
Well, welcome again to World of the Unexplained. Hello, all of you listeners in Phoenix, Arizona, KFNX News Talk 1100. Tonight, we have on World of the Unexplained author, and I'd like to call him occult historian, Peter Levenda is going to be with us. He wrote a book a few years ago called Unholy Alliance, which tied together what was really going on with the Nazis and occult and all the really strange things that happened from then on. And he's come up with a bunch of other stuff past that point that you can see on his website, which Trent, go ahead and click on that because I forget the URL. It's a .info, sinisterforces.info. And so we're going to bring him on tonight to talk about that. If you want to call in and be on the show and speak with Peter Levenda tonight, you can do that. 1-877-722-7382, toll free in the United States and Canada. That's 1-877-SCARE, the letter U, the number 2. But right now, without further ado, let's bring him on. Mr. Peter Levenda, how are you tonight, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great as well. Thank you for coming on to the show.
No, my pleasure.
I know we had a little short notice there where we switched times and all kinds of other weird, funky things. So I appreciate you hanging with us and accommodating us.
Not a problem.
Tell us about your website here, sinisterforces.info. I see that you've got a bunch of different things going on there. Tell us about your latest book first, and I guess we can work back if you'd like to do that, or vice versa.
Yeah, well, the website was set up by my publisher, the Sinister Forces trilogy, and it's sort of a clearinghouse for a lot of strange, coincidental, conspiracy-type information. My books, Sinister Forces, were really focused on American politics and the influence of religion, and you might call occultism, mysticism, let's say extreme religion, and the influence that's had on our political life in the United States, and what strange connections do exist between such things, for instance, as the Kennedy assassination on the one hand, and a mysterious group of people holding a seance in Maine in the 1950s on the other. I mean, what's the connection between these two? And when you start pulling at the threads, you find there's a lot of very strange stuff going on that we really don't talk about because no one's really brought it to our attention.
Now, go ahead.
Interesting. No, I don't really have a particular question. I just wonder where we're going to start with this.
Well, I was just gonna ask about the whole Alex Jones thing with the what's it called, the little place out in California that they all go and with the mock sacrifices and all this. Does any of this tie in with any of that?
Well, really, what happened is, if we're talking about assassinations and that sort of thing, I find a connection that goes back to a bunch of seances conducted in Maine in the 1950s, where some of the wealthiest families in the world were participating in these seances. And the connection that goes right from there directly to Lee Harvey Oswald and the Kennedy assassination. I mean, people who knew each other, people who were only a handshake away. And then you're talking about the Alex Jones stuff and, sacrifices out in California. Then you're in my Charles Manson territory out there,
Okay.
which is in another volume of Sinister Forces. I find that there is a connecting thread between all of these strange events, but it's not the kind of connecting thread you might think. I mean, some people are very intent on proving that there's a kind of a conspiracy of individuals behind some of these events. And I'm thinking there's something even darker and deeper than what we like to think of as conspiracies, which is why I call them Sinister Forces. That title came from the Watergate investigation when Alexander Haig, I believe it was, and Buzzard decided that the 18.5-minute tape gap on the Richard Nixon Oval Office tapes were due to, as they called it, sinister forces, which means they didn't try to posit a conspiracy. They didn't say that there was a human agency that did it. They just wanted to put it down to these mysterious, sinister forces, which I thought were pretty funny at the time. And then I said, well, maybe there are sinister forces. Maybe events such as assassinations and these political scandals, maybe there is an underlying connective tissue, but it's not what we think it is. It's not just a bunch of guys in a smoke-filled room, plotting world domination. It might be something stranger than that, really. And that's what Sinister Forces was trying to explore.
Huh.
Excellent. Well, let's. I guess let's talk about that seance in Maine. I've never heard of such a thing.
Yeah, I'd like to hear more about that.
Who were they trying to contact, and who were they? And for what ends?
The interesting thing about this is that the seances were conducted under the guidance of a man called Andrija Puharic. Now, Andrija Puharic was born in the United States, but of Yugoslavian parents, and he was a medical doctor that was involved with the Edgewood Arsenal chemical biological warfare operations at Edgewood Arsenal in New Jersey during the Cold War, the early 1950s. But he was a guy who was giving lectures to the Army on how to weaponize parapsychological powers or paranormal powers. He thought that ESP, telekinesis, telepathy, all of these things could be weaponized, and he was trying to convince the Defense Department to fund an operation like that. Well, at the same time, he has a laboratory up in Maine, and on New Year's Eve, I think it was 1952 to 53, in freezing cold in Maine in the winter, he has a bunch of people up there whose names are very familiar to a lot of Americans. The family names are. He has a DuPont up there. He has a Forbes up there. He has an Astor up there. He has 9 people. And of these 9 people, you have the wealthiest families in America represented by a Forbes and an Astor and a Payne and a DuPont. And on top of this, he's got Arthur Young there. Now, Arthur Young was the man who invented the Bell helicopter. So he was an engineer during the war. After the end of the war, he opted out of the military-industrial complex and decided to devote his energies full-time to a pursuit and a study of the paranormal. So he got involved with Puharic, and his wife was Ruth Forbes Payne. In other words, the same Forbes family as you have John Kerry, famously, Forbes magazine, that whole dynasty. So Ruth Forbes was there, and married to Arthur Young. That was his wife. And like I say, the other wealthy families, they're conducting the seance with a Hindu mystic who's there channeling a group called the Nine. Now, these 9 are supposed to be extraterrestrial type, creatures floating above the earth. And at the same time, there were 9 people involved in the seance. So I use the term the 9 to refer to both of these ideas because it's the 9 people, the 9 wealthy families with Puharic, plus also this idea of there's 9 extraterrestrial types. Now, this sounds weird. It sounds like I'm making it up, but I'm not.
Oh, we've heard worse. We've heard a lot worse. Go ahead.
Well, this is all really well documented. This is Puharic has written about it, and as a matter of fact, it came up briefly, sort of ambiguously during the Warren Commission. If you read the volumes of the Warren Commission, when they were interviewing a woman called Ruth Payne.
Okay.
Ruth Payne was the woman who lived in Dallas, who was trying to learn Russian from Marina Oswald. Marina Oswald was living with her, with the children. Lee Harvey Oswald would occasionally show up. He had his own apartment closer to the Texas School Book Depository. But the Ruth Payne was their friend. Ruth Payne was their entree sort of into the Dallas, how to get a job and, teaching Oswald how to drive, evidently, and a lot of stuff like that. She was a family friend.
Okay.
And her husband is Michael Payne, who's the son of Ruth Forbes Payne and the stepson of Arthur Young. So a couple of months before the assassination, Ruth Payne, a friend of Marina Oswald and Lee Harvey Oswald, decides she has to go up and talk to Arthur Young about who knows what. Maybe it's just a nice kind of family visit. But she's got these Russians living with her, right? Including Lee Harvey Oswald, who was a major defector from the Soviet Union to the Soviet Union and back again, right? A Marine, radar operator, the whole thing, made a little bit of publicity when he came back to the United States after defecting, all this other stuff. I mean, you can bet she discussed all this with Arthur Young, right?
Sure.
Had to. And it's obvious, right? She's got these really weird people. This is 1963, She's got communists, living with her. Marina Oswald was there. So all of this discussion must be taking place. She comes back, and within a month, more or less, the assassination takes place, a job that she helped Lee Harvey Oswald get. So I started thinking, well, that's wild. I mean, what are the odds against that kind of a coincidence? Here we have Arthur Young, this guy who's devoting all of his money and energy into studying psychic phenomena, yoga, astrology, everything, all the sort of New Age stuff, married to this very wealthy woman. They have a big estate that they're living on. And they have all of this money, all these interests. They've been, steadily involved since the 50s, since the Cold War, in all of the idea of weaponizing, psychic powers. And they're a handshake away from Lee Harvey Oswald. So then I started looking at it a bit deeper, and I found out that George de Mohrenschildt, all of you Kennedy assassination people out there know these names, George de Mohrenschildt was the Russian who introduced Lee Harvey Oswald to Ruth Paine in Dallas. George de Mohrenschildt was also connected with the Nine through a friend of his called George Wasson, who was the guy who was researching psychedelic mushrooms in Mexico for Puharich. De Mohrenschildt supposedly committed suicide while he was being interviewed concerning his possible role in the Kennedy assassination. And in his address book, they had, the phone numbers of these people, of the Nine, of Wasson and some of the others. So there was this bizarre swirl of mystical stuff around Lee Harvey Oswald. The poor guy never had a chance, he has, Arthur Young, Ruth Forbes Paine Young, Ruth Paine in Dallas. He's got George de Mohrenschildt. All these people are heavily connected to a major investigation into psychic phenomena, contacting extraterrestrial entities, at least that's what they thought, doing all of this psychic research, all this occult research. And there's Lee Harvey Oswald, the Patsy, the famous Patsy. Once I started pulling at those threads, then the story just got weirder and weirder.
No, so you're saying that you believe that Lee Harvey Oswald was a patsy?
I believe that he was. I think there's a good chance that he was. But whether he was or he wasn't, if you start looking at all of the other stuff around Oswald, these are the things that drive the conspiracy people nuts, because they see all of these so-called coincidences. They multiply and multiply and multiply like crazy. And they insist that there's a conspiracy. And the mainstream historians insist there was no conspiracy.
Sure.
I think that there's a middle path between here. I think that events sometimes organize, how shall I put it, organize things in such a way, in a kind of quantum consciousness kind of fashion, where things do get organized around these events. I think the Kennedy assassination pulled so many disparate events around it, as if it was a moment in space-time that had ripples out in all directions. There was a Belgian playwright. He won the Nobel Prize for Literature around the turn of the century, a guy called Maurice Maeterlinck. And he was famous for creating the Bluebird plays, which they made into a movie later with Jane Fonda, back in the 70s, I think. It was a very famous play when it came out, The Bluebird of Happiness. We get that expression from this play. Mm-hmm. Well, he wrote another play called The Cloud That Lifted. And in this play, published around the same time, around 1900 or so, we have a description of an assassination. And there's an assassination of a king. We don't know how many shots are fired in the play. The shots come from a grassy knoll, and the guy who supposedly kills this king is a Russian whose name is Alex. Now, for the Kennedy assassination people who follow this stuff, Alex was one of the pseudonyms of Lee Harvey Oswald when he lived in Russia, and it was also one of the pseudonyms that he evidently used to buy the rifle that he used for the assassination, the Mannlicher Carcano.
Sure.
So, and he was a Russian. He thought he was doing the bidding of Mother Russia, according to the play. So we have really a prediction of the assassination, even into details, written by a man who was heavily involved in psychic phenomena research. Maurice Maeterlinck was a very strong mystic. He wrote a lot of books on mysticism as well as his own plays. So he was very involved in all of this. And here he writes a play which basically predicts the assassination. Now, is that a conspiracy? Obviously not, right? I mean, maybe he had a telepathic, premonition or something. But the other people around the assassination, all with their mystical connections, all with their religious connections, are what really fascinated me. David Ferry and Jack Martin were bishops in a weird church. These were the guys in New Orleans, if you saw the movie JFK.
And read the book.
was Joe Pesci, right?
Yeah.
Jack Martin was Jack Lemmon. I mean, these are the character actors in that film. And these guys, David Ferry and Jack Martin, were bishops in a weird church. And no one's understood that. Even Jim Garrison, the New Orleans DA, could not figure that out. I mean, in his writings and in his files, which have been declassified, you go through this stuff, and Garrison is saying, "Who are all these guys? What does this mean?" And he started to get spooked out by all of the connections. He knew there was an intelligence operation of some kind taking place in New Orleans connected to the assassination, but he couldn't figure out what it was.
Well, Garrison, I mean, I thought it was remarkable that he actually portrayed, Chief Justice Ed Warren in that film.
Yeah, that was pretty funny.
Yeah, that was kind of a unique twist. Now, we've had Dr. Cyril Wecht on before, the famous forensic pathologist on the show. Or I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but he talks a lot about the JFK conspiracy. He was on the House and Senate assassination committee that they reopened, I believe, in '77.
That's right.
As one of their experts, and he says that, well, this couldn't have happened this way; it had happened this way, and X, Y, and Z. But it's really interesting stuff. What do you feel? You talk about the psychical aspect of this with the paranormal. What do you feel happened, or are you just coming at it from a research point of view?
Well, I'm basically a researcher. What I'm doing is I'm looking at the stuff that nobody looks at because they don't understand it. Garrison had a really difficult time with the churches. He couldn't have figured that out. He wrote to the House Subcommittee on Assassinations, that very same committee, saying, "You got to look into this. I don't know what it means, but it's all over the place, and I can't quite put it together." I did the research on that. I mean, I was fortunate or unfortunate, however you want to look at it. In 1968, at the time of the Garrison probe, I lived in the Bronx. I'm from the Bronx in New York. And I knew the church that David Ferry belonged to.
Okay.
And that gave me this extra angle of perspective on this. And I thought, I didn't know this for years. I did not know it at the time. But it was only with the declassification of a lot of the JFK documents after the movie came out, JFK, when they went and declassified tens of thousands of documents, that I began to realize that, hold it, wait a minute, I know these people, or I knew the church they belonged to, and then the whole thing started to fall into place. Because the guy who ran that church, that Ferry and Martin, and actually a lot of other people in New Orleans belonged to, the guy who ran it was working for the FBI. He was running that church as a front. It was an intelligence operation.
Oh, my
God. So you had Ferry, Martin, all these guys fronting, actually, because in the 60s, it was a different world. If you wore a clerical collar, you could get in almost anywhere. I mean, people just basically waved you through. You could go into a hospital, in the middle of the night to visit a sick patient, who might later die of a heart attack, within an hour. Nobody would stop you because you're a priest.
Or so they thought.
Right.
Right.
Wow. Amazing.
You could get in anywhere. You could do a lot of stuff. And having a church as a front is perfect. You can move people across borders. Nobody questioned you back in the 60s. You could go almost anywhere, and you got a lot of respect and a lot of you got away with murder. I mean, literally and figuratively, especially in the case of Ferry and Martin and those guys. I mean, there was a lot of weird stuff going on with that church. And because I accidentally happened to know them, that's what gave me this angle of looking at all this again and saying, wait a minute, I think I see, I can discern a pattern here. And since then, I've interviewed some of the surviving members of that church, some of these bishops and clergymen. I even got photographs of Jack Martin wearing clerical garb, They talked to me about how they remembered David Ferry and Jack Martin and these guys. I mean, the church angle is a very important one for understanding what was happening in New Orleans that Garrison was so mystified by.
Yeah, no, if it's a front for the FBI, how many people who were involved in that church were aware of it, as opposed to some people thinking, "Oh, this is an interesting view on religion"?
A lot of the people. I mean, the church had no congregation. I mean, that should tell you right away.
Okay.
Okay. They did have services on Sunday, but that was to keep up appearances. but if you would go to the service and there'd be nobody there except the clergy. All the clergy would be there doing the service. That was the end of it, So there was, basically, there was nobody there. I mean, it was obviously fake. I mean, there was nothing really going on. And the clergy were coming in from left and right. I mean, you had people coming in from Europe all the time, people coming in from Africa. During the Biafran Civil War, we had Nigerians coming over to be consecrated as bishops and going back. And these were the anti-Biafran, the anti-Catholic. The Catholics were supporting Biafra, if you remember that whole thing back in the 60s. And the people that were being consecrated at this church were definitely not Catholics. They were going to support the government against Biafra. So there was a lot of covert stuff that was taking place using the church as the Union front.
Huh. That's interesting. I remember in college doing a whole section on Biafra and that whole conflict, but I really don't remember a lot of it anymore. That's awful for me to admit that. Yeah. But anyway, we're speaking with Peter Levenda. Peter, let's talk some more about this Nazi occult thing that we haven't got into at all. I'd like to talk a little bit about it if we can when we come back. We're getting ready to take a break. But call in here. Our number is 877-722-7382. That's toll free in the U.S. and Canada. Or 877-SCARE-U2. You can call us here toll free. Won't cost you a dime. Speak with Peter and myself and Mr. Lackey. I'm sitting over there in the corner. But I did, on a lighter note, I did catch Warlock 3 this weekend.
I'm sorry. Scott, are you serious?
I did.
You really watched Warlock 3?
See, there's an ongoing joke here, Peter, about how I don't know anything about druids and mysticism and things like that, and I really don't know a lot. And a joke I made about a year ago on the show was that everything I learned about the druids I learned from watching Warlock 2.
From Warlock 3.
Yeah. So Warlock 3, I just saw it was like free on pay-per-view or something. I was like, oh, it's free.
Wait a minute, it's free on pay-per-view?
Oh, you know it's bad when it's free.
Yeah,
when your cable company's giving it to you.
Yeah, here, please.
Yeah.
So, I didn't really learn anything, but other than it was somebody spent a lot of money to make that film, and that's terrible.
Unbelievable.
And I also watched Pineapple Express. That was actually worth the laugh. But anyway. Yeah, Warlock.
That doesn't do anything to do with the occult.
Warlock, nothing at all.
You were thinking about Leprechaun 3, weren't you?
That was going to cost me $1.99, and I just couldn't spring the $2.
Oh my gosh! Okay.
So anyway, that number
nothing to do with anything. Okay.
That number again is 877-722-7382. That's 877-SCARE-U2. The lines are open, and we will anxiously await your calls. And if you want to talk about the JFK conspiracy, if you want to talk about the Nazis and the occult, if you want to talk about how all these things fit together, if you want to get into the Manson stuff, whatever, any questions you've got for Peter or for us, feel free to, just drop us a line here and let us know. You can also check us out on the internet, worldoftheunexplained.com. You can check out Mr. Levenda's site, sinisterforces.info. Is that your site, Peter, or is that your publisher's?
It's the publishers, but I'm the one who updates it. We get hacked every once in a while, so some of my articles get taken down, so I'm in the process of putting them back up again. But there's still a lot of stuff there.
All right, well, once again, you're listening to World of the Unexplained. We're going to be right back here in just a moment. Now time for the news. We'll see you in just a bit.
Here we are, World of the Unexplained. We got Peter Levenda tonight talking about all sorts of occult conspiracies, and we were just talking about the JFK assassination. Give us a call. 1-877.
He's got to look at the board. Oh my God! How long have we been doing this? And you don't remember the number?
Look, I just do it. It's habit. All right.
We've been doing this since like 06.
Okay.
The number's only changed like once.
Right. That's fair.
And that was in like 07.
Can I get the number out, Scott?
Yeah, go ahead.
1-877-722-7382 or 1-877.
I'm doing the numbers from now on.
Yeah, maybe you should. Wow.
My birthday's tomorrow, guys.
Happy birthday, Scott.
Well, thank you.
Happy birthday.
Well, thank you.
So unprofessional.
It's cool.
Yeah, no, it's not.
They know us. But anyway.
So, give us a call.
I've got a question for you, Peter, that's a little off track here. I looked you up in Wikipedia. They've got a page about you there.
Right.
And they say that you're Simon.
Yeah, I know. I've seen that before, and I've tried to get them to change it, and they won't, or they do, and then it goes back to the previous whoever posted that initially.
Oh, okay. So you're not Simon.
No. That's been going around. That's an old canard that's been on the internet for the last, I don't know, 5 or 10 years, I guess. I don't know.
Okay.
That's pretty weird. Somebody apparently really is thoroughly convinced that you're actually Simon and not Peter.
It's some kind of Necronomicon. What was it exactly?
Excuse me?
The link for the Simon thing.
Don't know.
Oh, it was something about you were your pen name was Simon for something dealing with a book on the Necronomicon or something like that.
No, I know. Yeah, that's what the Wikipedia article is insisting. But like I said, there's no way I can change that back. So I gave up trying. But that's been going around for a while. I've been accused of that a number of times. I was involved with it in the beginning, and I've never made a secret of that. I was involved in the early stages of it when the book first came to light. So I did see it. I helped kind of identify some of the languages that were being used in the book. But that's about the extent of it.
Oh, okay.
Well, can we shift gears? Would you mind for a little bit?
No.
Let's. I want to hear about all this. I know you wrote this book. I believe in 1994.
Holy Alliance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to know about some of the weird occult things that were going on with Hitler and the Nazis. What can you tell us about that?
Well, the influence of occult beliefs on the Nazi Party, was profound. There was Hitler himself, as a young man, was poverty-stricken. He lost his mother, both of his parents, when he was young. He wound up trying to make a living as a painter, as an artist in Vienna, and that wasn't working too well. But he did manage to read a lot of occult literature when he was a young man in Germany before the start of World War I. In fact, if you read John Toland's very famous biography about Adolf Hitler, there's some of Hitler's poetry that he wrote in the trenches during World War I is reproduced there. And this poetry is all, hymns to the Nordic gods. It's hymns to Wotan and all of this. Hitler was into a very anti-Christian, sort of pro-pagan, pro-Teutonic mindset at the time. And it's revealed in the way that he was able to conduct these vast ceremonies, these rituals at Nuremberg, for instance, and the other things with an eye towards, manipulating consciousness. A lot of the people who were involved in the early days of the Nazi Party were all very heavily involved with occultism. They saw occultism as kind of a way to, fight the idea of the church, fight Christianity. It was a Nietzschean kind of Superman thing that they were trying to adopt. There was an order of New Templars that existed around the same year, I think, that Hitler's mother passed away. This guy, who was a former Catholic monk himself, created an order of Templars that was very racist, very anti-Semitic in tone. There were a lot of other German mystical ideologues around Germany at the time. And what a lot of people don't realize is that at the end of World War I, Germany was going socialist and communist really quickly. The troops coming back from that conflict, the ones who were fighting on the Russian front, were coming back and saying, the hell with this. And they were really defecting over to a socialist or a communist mindset.
Kind of like the U.S. is now, right?
Yeah, that's what some people say, yeah.
Sorry, had to slide that in. Go ahead.
I know, I was waiting for it. Yeah.
Me too.
But anyway, that's what was taking place there. There was this struggle, and in Munich, Hitler had been in the trenches, and of course he's coming back. The war is over. He's being demobilized, and there's this conflict in Munich. Munich is going socialist. They have a socialist mayor, and they're going to become, true socialists. And the socialists were taking power in Munich. What you have at the end of the war is something that's really fascinating. You have pitched battles being fought between the communist troops that are trying to control the city from Munich and a bunch of right-wing fascist, basically, troops. And these troops are being financed in large part by an occult society called the Thule Gesellschaft, which was a secret society meeting in the Four Seasons Hotel in Munich for a number of years. And these were people being financed by industrialists and everything, and they were doing these having weird speeches on, the effect of runes, how to do yoga in a Teutonic fashion, talking about all sorts of theosophical ideas. And at the same time, they're organizing these, what they call the Freikorps, or the free army that was going to fight the communists. So you had pitched battles taking place in Munich between communists on the one side and cultists on the other side. These guys who had painted swastikas on their helmets. And this is 1919 we're talking about. You know, the Nazi Party itself didn't exist yet. And yet the swastika was considered the sacred symbol. It was considered powerful. It was considered Teutonic and German and Aryan. And these guys were singing hymns to the swastika as they're marching through the streets of Munich, and they're fighting battles with the communists, and they take back the city. So this is the kind of atmosphere in which Hitler, as a young man and a young soldier, is being brought up in. And then, of course, they send him, the kind of an intelligence operation in the army, sends Hitler to go and investigate the Thule Gesellschaft at the Four Seasons Hotel in Munich. And the Thule Gesellschaft is running something called the German Workers' Party, which sounds like a communist, party.
Sure.
The German Workers' Party, which gets renamed, of course, to the National Socialist German Workers' Party, which sounds even more communist, but which isn't. And Hitler goes to infiltrate it, and instead of infiltrating it, he eventually becomes the leader of it. And they adopt that swastika as their symbol, and the rest is history. I mean, if you have any doubts that the Nazi Party was a cult, all you have to do is look at the swastika. I mean, what political party would use that? I mean, here's the swastika as their symbol. Hello. This is like an ancient pagan thing. It has no secular sectarian meaning at all, right? It's a mystical symbol. So for me, doing my research, I came to that conclusion that the Nazi Party was not a political party the way we understand it. It was a cult. It was a really well-dressed cult and a really well-financed cult, but it was a cult nonetheless, especially the SS, especially Himmler's SS. That all the gloves were off with that one. That became a real sort of a satanic cult completely. I mean, there was just no ambiguity about it.
Yeah. What do you? That being said, there's two questions I'm trying to think of. What's the connection between the Nazi Party, for example, and the Theosophist Society? Madame Blavatsky, and back in the turn of the 19th century. Are there connections there? And second of all, what is, we hear a lot of buzz sometimes about the Nazis going after, and then maybe part of it comes from Raiders of the Lost Ark. What do where they go around the world and they start looking for like Shangri-La or the Spear of Longinus or these
Sure.
mythic artifacts. I mean, what's is there any truth to that?
Oh, there's a lot of truth to that. In fact, the reason that I wrote Unholy Alliance, I had originally started to write a book which later became Sinister Forces, which was just trying to explore the relationship between religion and politics. It was a very sort of benign, kind of an idea, until I started doing the research at the National Archives in Washington, D.C., during the 70s, really during Watergate, as a matter of fact. And I started going through the records there, the microfilm records of the captured German documents from World War II. And the archivist there was a Dr. Robert Wolf, very famous guy. All the German researchers knew this guy. He was a very friendly, very capable man there who ran the captured German records section. And he said, why don't you look at this stuff, And he leads me to the files they had on the SS Ahnenerbe, which was the Ancestral Heritage Research Society that became a part of the SS under Himmler. These guys, I mean, all the records are there. Anything you'd want to make up about Indiana Jones has already been done in those German documents. You will not believe the stuff that's in there. And I touched upon a bunch of that in Unholy Alliance. But, for instance, the Nazi the SS expedition to Tibet, how weird is that? You have a whole bunch of German anthropologists in 1938, just before the war really breaks out in earnest. These guys go on this very expensive expedition to Tibet. And as they're in Tibet, they're measuring craniums, They're doing all this stuff, trying to figure out, who the Tibetans really are. Because there's this belief that they are the survivors of the real Aryan race, the root race of the Germans. And they're coming back. They're bringing back sacred scriptures. They're bringing back sacred artifacts and all of this stuff. I mean, a Tibet expedition. And the documentation is all there. It's very clear. There was no bones about it. But what's chilling about this is that these same anthropologists come back from that expedition, And these are the same guys, the same individuals. I don't mean just the same society, but the same exact individuals who then conduct some of the worst experiments on human subjects, on living human subjects, at Dachau and at some of the other camps. So here are these anthropologists who are up there, you think, in this Dalai Lama-esque place, right? They're at Shangri-La, and they're there for a considerable length of time. They bring back all this stuff to Germany, and within 2 or 3 years, they're conducting experiments on live human subjects at the camps. These are the same people.
Wonderful.
I can't get my head around that, really.
No.
You think, today we think of, Richard Gere and the Dalai Lama, Steven Seagal. They're out there with, there was with scarves around their shoulders, and they're bowing, and they're, doing all the Buddhist stuff. Would you imagine these guys would come back and start conducting, experiments and torturing prisoners?
Well, Steven Seagal, maybe he's a little crazy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'll give you that. Yeah.
We have a caller on. We have Ron from Raleigh. So we're going to bring him on.
Hey, Ron, how's it going?
Hey, it's going pretty good, guys. How are you doing tonight?
We're doing good.
What do you have for Peter tonight?
Well, I was going over, I can remember going in a Tibetan shop when I was in New York City and seeing a swastika on the shirt with a bunch of other symbols from Tibet. And after doing a little bit of research, it looked like the swastika was a very ancient Tibetan symbol for power or power generation, kind of like a windmill is.
Right.
And where this all is going is, in the context of Hitler's poetry to Nordic gods and things, if the Nazi expedition to Tibet was in search of ancient technology that they thought would empower them, but they saw this technology as intrinsically bound to these other than Christian gods or other than Christian forces, can you talk a little bit about what was their philosophy on humanity? Like, what was the general humanity's place in this equation? Were they disposable, which is what I have always been led to believe, that the philosophy was that the powerful or the Aryan group, which was an ancient group originally allegedly from India, was somehow inherent in the German people, and thus they were superior, but that subhumanized every other group of people that didn't adhere to their philosophy, and led to a lot of their use of these occult and somewhat diabolical war crime type activities against humanity to reduce them overall. Is that your general impression of how the occult fit in so prominently into the rise of Nazis to power?
Well, actually, that's a good question. It gets us right back to your first question, which was about Blavatsky. It ties in with that specifically. What happened with Blavatsky and the Theosophical Society, which laid the groundwork for a lot of this thinking, was that they believed that as a counter to Darwinian evolution, which people felt, Darwin's evolution and his theories and his books on that was somehow taking something away from the church. It was saying that the church was wrong. A lot of people were having a religious crisis over Darwin, as much as they are today in some parts of the country. So this crisis then prompted people like Blavatsky to say, hey, we can take concepts like evolution and apply it to spirituality and say there's a spiritual evolution as well as a physical evolution, that they go together somehow.
But
and
as opposed to Christ,
yeah,
which would value all human life and would
right,
be placing God in his proper place, this was a total disregard of God in conquest of power, where human life rapidly became meaningless. And
well, absolutely. Blavatsky's own writings pretty much say that. There's a strong anti-Semitic strain in Blavatsky's writings. I've written about it in other places, in other journals and things. There's a lot of anti-Semitism there. This idea that there are evolved races on the planet and subhuman races on the planet, and this was very much part of Blavatsky's mindset in those days. And for her, the swastika was the ultimate symbol of the Aryan race, of the highest level, most highest evolved race on the planet now, according to Blavatsky, was the Aryan race, and their symbol was the swastika. The very first incorporation papers of the Theosophical Society in New York they don't call themselves the Theosophical Society. They call themselves the Aryan Theosophical Society. It's something a lot of people don't know. But her focus was on this idea of an Aryan society, and the swastika figures prominently in her thinking. And this affected a lot of German intellectuals around the 1880s, 1890s, who were reading her books, The Secret Doctrine, Isis Unveiled, and they were getting all of these ideas that, yeah, there are subhuman races. They're all over the place. We can see them from our window, And so it became this kind of a search for the roots of this super race that the Germans believed themselves to be, because they thought the swastika was their symbol. You know.
In a more modern context, it also can be for people who are active in the paranormal to search for the last derivatives of what this regime put in place. Like in North Carolina, I think as far back as 1974 or even 1979, people who were considered retarded and thus wards of the state were sterilized to keep them from having children. And that ties into a concept called eugenics. Does that fit anywhere into these groupings of people and the people who put forward that philosophy?
Well, of course, eugenics is something that the Nazis embraced, and they got that from, of all places, the United States. They thought that what we were doing in the United States was enlightened. Not only our eugenics programs, the forced sterilization of people for various reasons, the attack on the Native American population that we undertook when we had our manifest destiny and took over the continent. To the Germans, this was like propaganda for them. This was, supporting what their ideas were for Europe. They wanted to do the same thing, and at the same time get rid of the undesirable elements, as they would put it. So they put them in camps the way we put Indians on reservations, except for the Nazis, it was a blatant program of eradication. And the reason behind it, from the Nazi point of view, was similar to the theosophical ideas. To the Nazis, the blood and the spirit are the same. So the blood carries the spirit. The genetic component of the race is the spiritual component of the race, which is why to the SS, you could not even sleep with, have sexual intercourse with a Jew, because that would pollute your own blood according to their philosophy. So it wasn't just that you had, Jewish parents a couple of generations ago that would condemn you. It was the fact that you even slept with a Jew, because that would be spiritually polluting.
Thank you for the call, Ron, by the way.
Yeah, thanks, Ron.
But, I saw this History Channel special, you probably saw it, Trent, where they had all these, and I never knew this, but they had all these camps set up for them to make babies.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, it was just a baby breeding, white Aryan kind of guy thing, in Germany.
Trying to produce
soldiers that come in, have a good time, and leave.
Right, exactly. It was called the Lebensborn, and there are people alive today who were born, from that organization. I mean, they're children and grandchildren of those so pure Aryan babies.
I'm assuming a lot of them don't. Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. I assume a lot of them don't even know who their mother and father are.
No, they don't. There was no particular records.
That's amazing.
It was as long as they went in with the right credentials. I mean, they wanted SS officers to do this, so it was really the SS. It was the breeding farm for SS, because if you were in the SS, you had to prove your purity of blood going back to 1750, the year 1750, the earliest or the latest document you could have to prove you had no Jewish blood and no quote unquote subhuman blood, which would have meant Slavic or something else like that.
Yeah.
So you had to prove that. Once you proved your blood was pure, and the women, of course, had to prove their blood was pure, then it was really a breeding farm. There was no marriage involved in this, so there was no paperwork to show who was the father of what children. That wasn't important.
Now, how many babies did they produce at this place?
Well, a lot of the records are gone. A lot of the records were destroyed, but there's been some research on it recently. There have been a few books about it, and it would appear that there were tens of thousands of people born in the Lebensborn organizations.
That is insane.
It really is. You just touched on something. We're almost out of time, but when you're talking about the spiritual pollution, and how the blood can't mix because that's spiritually polluting, and it's interesting because what Ron was talking about with Hindu mysticism and Shangri-La and the swastika, spiritual pollution is like a big deal in Hinduism. It's part of the reason why they developed the caste system in the first place.
Right.
And they have all these rituals and ceremonies to try to prevent spiritual pollution, like in your kitchen or in your living room or in the place that you live. And that's an interesting connection. You wouldn't really see it the first time around, I guess, between European Aryan race and deeply ascetic Hindu mystics out in the bush somewhere.
Well, actually, there was a guy living in New York City. He's passed away since then, but his name was James Madole, and he ran something called the National Renaissance Party. It was a neo-Nazi group, and his newsletters were all focused on Hinduism, Theosophy, Blavatsky, and trying to show that the Hindu caste system was the way we should organize American society. So I mean, this was something that's very close to Nazi philosophy. He saw it as identical. He said that's what we should be doing.
That's amazing. Now, before I totally almost have forgotten. How do we get a hold of your books? How's the listener out there get a hold of your books? It's the easiest way.
Well, the best way probably is through Amazon or Barnes & Noble if you're buying online. They have the Sinister Forces trilogy, of course, and the other books that I've written on Holy Alliance, and I've written some books on religion and philosophy as well, Stairway to Heaven, and I have a book on the Freemasons coming out next month.
Awesome. That looks like fun. Cool. Yeah, we definitely...
Peter, we definitely need to have you back, and thank you so much for changing your schedule around and being on such short notice with the time change.
Not at all.
But it was definitely a pleasure, and they can check you out at sinisterforces.info, correct?
That's right. Yeah, and they can buy the books there as well. They can buy Sinister Forces online from them.
Okay, great. Well, thanks so much for coming out tonight. We appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Take care.
Thank you.
And that was Peter Levenda, sinisterforces.info. You can check that out, and you can always check it out at worldoftheunexplained.com, where we try to keep you up to date. Sometimes that works out, sometimes it doesn't. But
it's a pretty slick-looking website, too.
Yeah, definitely.
I have to say.
Got a lot of cool information
I mean,
there.
an hour is almost not enough time to talk to that guy.
I know it's not. It's crazy.
Talk to about that sort of thing. There's so many different angles you could have gone with it. I mean, we could have easily talked the whole time, plus some about JFK. And
of course.
other
We just tried to, how do you say it? Break it down and chop it? What is it?
Take it out and chop it up.
That's it. Take it out and chop it up. And we try to do that in the limited time we've got. worldoftheunexplained.com. You can email us. You got any suggestions or anything at Gmail, worldoftheunexplained@gmail.com, worldoftheunexplained@gmail.com. This is Jay Scott, your only JD DJ that I know of on KFNX.
And this is Trent Lackey. We're coming to you from Kernersville, North Carolina. We like to call it K-Vegas, a small town to talk about big things.
We're out.